So today we're going to talk about ban the box legislation, the legislation that's aimed to get employers to take the question on their job application off that asks an applicant if they've been convicted of a crime. These laws seem to be sweeping the nation at this point, and today we're here with Angela Bosworth, our Vice President of Compliance and General Counsel, as well as Jason Morris, our President and Chief Operating Officer. So, Angela, tell us about these laws. Where are they happening? What's going on?
Well, the Ban the Box movement is really an effort on the part of organizations and individuals that want to support ex-cons getting back into the workforce. And so there is a belief that if there is a checkbox on an application that asks whether or not someone has a criminal conviction, that is a barrier to that person actually being able to move forward in the hiring process, and an obstacle to individuals who might have some sort of a criminal record to really getting jobs. So what we're seeing is really a lot of state legislatures and municipalities that are looking at proposals that really ban the practice, or if they don't outright, have an outright ban to that checkbox, they might be putting other laws or ordinances into place to defer questions until later in the hiring process. Now, sometimes it only applies to government employees or people employed by the state or by that municipality, but oftentimes it's really being applied to all employers, which potentially causes a problem for the employer.
Sure.
And so, these different laws are creating a real patchwork of considerations for employers, and if they're hiring in multiple municipalities or in different states, it can cause a problem.
Sure. So it's important to point out that it doesn't stop employers from conducting a background check, but there could be some drawbacks to employers. You want to elaborate?
I mean, as an employer, I think it gives an employee a fair shot. I really do. I think that historically there was applicant tracking systems that were literally dinging people out of the system if they had checked that box. So I think it's a lot more fair. You're giving that applicant a good shot for the person and his abilities or her abilities, rather than just disqualifying them based on a box that they check. And I think it's fair. I think it's a great idea.
But the problem with that is if you're an employer and you know that there is a bona fide job qualification that would disqualify someone for a very legitimate reason based on the job. For example, if you're running a school system or dealing with some type of a vulnerable population like the elderly, and you're not permitted to ask that question early in the process, you're really, it can be onerous for the employer.
It can, but even with the Wells Fargo thing that we saw with that guy that was disqualified for a 35-year-old conviction, I mean, there is an appeal process to that, so that it even gives that employer an insight to say, yes, I know that's there, but I still want to go forward with this person. I'm going to fight for this person, and I'm going to try to bring this person on board. There's still an opportunity before you hire them, because you might ask for previous convictions on the background check release. So you're going to know about it, and really what misfortune is there for an employer to do an extra couple of interviews and then realize that they can't hire the person then?
Well, and I mean, there are two sides to that. All of a sudden, they've gone down the road, they've invested in bringing this person along. Now they're finding out about this, and it would disqualify them. I mean, in general, I think that we can argue on both sides of the equation for it. I think the important point that you made, though, is to ask the question. So it's not the fact. I don't think the issue is it's a bad thing to take it off the job application, but I think it is, if you take it off the job application, make sure you're asking about it at a different time.
Yeah, I would never condone getting rid of the box completely. It's got to be done before the person is brought on board and before the background check is run, otherwise you're wasting your money. But again, later on in the process, I think is a great practice. And one of the points I try to make, all the time is, recruiters are trying to find people to bring into the organization. They're not trying to disqualify people immediately. Their job is to bring people and good talent into the company. So I think, listening to that and thinking about that with that process is important.
Yeah. Real quickly, Angela, the EEOC introduced new guidelines in April of 2012, which in essence spoke to employers' use of criminal background checks. They had something to say about ban the box. is it clear as to what they're saying and what employers should do with that?
The new EEOC guidance does mention the checkbox, and the guidance says that they do not recommend asking about criminal history in the application process. They recommend deferring the questions until after, at least after the application. The EEOC guidance is just that. It's just guidance. It's not the law. But if you are in a state or a local jurisdiction that has passed a specific law, it is the law in that jurisdiction. Where employers are confused is really, there isn't any real clear guidance as to when it is appropriate to ask the question. And legally, there's no case law saying that practice is illegal. I think we will see the issue litigated, but and Jason made a good point. You know, what's the harm in deferring the question until later in the process? I do think it's problematic for employers that are hiring in a number of states and in a number of cities, trying to figure out which law they're supposed to comply with. And now the EEOC has come in and said, well, we don't really recommend that you ask until later. And so the question we're getting from employers is what's appropriate and when. And some of that depends on the position. It depends on, the job qualifications and what do they need to know to make the best decision.
All right, so the bottom line on this one is that there are ban-the-box laws that are getting enacted across the country. They are asking employers to take that question off the job application. The main piece of advice I think that we have is if you do take it off the job application, make sure you don't forget about it a little bit later in the process and ask the question.